Welcome to another episode of The Profit Builder. I am super excited about today's topic and my guest, David Luperger. David is going to be talking with us today about succession, selling your business, planning your next stage of life. Like, as a contractor, how do you figure out, like, I've done this business for a really long time, and now I want to be thinking about like having more of life than just working. And David has actually built a business. He's a former contractor. He's built a business around helping contractors answer that question and solve that problem for themselves. So, David, welcome. Thank you so much for being here as a guest
It's
today.
great. Thank you very much, Vicki. It's a great subject.
Yeah. And I love your perspective about this. And I so appreciate, too, that you as a contractor have experienced having to go from contracting to figuring out your next iteration. And you've gone through a couple iterations. And so before we kind of jump in, I know, I have my questions that I'm going to ask you, but before we jump in, would you just introduce yourself, tell people your name, your business, and a little bit about your background?
David Luperger. As you can see, my receding hairline, I'm in my 60s, but that's the benefit of experience. And so was a building contractor for over 25 years and love working with contractors because of the quality of the people. And am now doing, industry events and really speaking with people about how do you prepare for this transition? What does it look like? How to understand it, and really how to systematically begin approaching it.
Nice. I think it's really great that you're doing this because, like I said, you have a perspective from having been in the industry and having had to go through that transition for yourself.
And going through that transition myself now. Yeah.
So what interested you in this transition planning specifically, and what made this a priority in your business, your consulting business? Why this particular area?
It's such a great question because, up to COVID, I was doing a lot of industry events. So trade shows, association meetings, and really enjoy working with, the contractor members, and discovered in front of the room, honestly, half the room had either no hair or white hair. And suddenly, I'm looking at this aging population and I'm one of them. And I began asking the question, I can see, you're in my age range. What are you doing about transitioning or exiting? And I usually was met with silence. And what was interesting is, as I spoke with people, afterwards, it's not that they're not thinking about it, but really they didn't know what to do and how to approach this. And the irony of all this is, guess what? I'm planning my own next chapter. So I'm in a similar place of saying, what do I want to do now? What does it look like? How do I really, I've had my head down for 30 years, like most of us, working, raising a family. And guess what? My son's now gone. We're empty nesters. What does come next? What do we want to do? If we don't plan it, it won't happen.
Yeah. I love that because, one of the things I say to people is if you don't choose, the universe will choose for you, and that whole thing of, I also appreciate that sometimes we don't know the questions to ask.
Right.
It's like, well, I don't even know where to begin, which is why I'm glad we're having this conversation. Because I think that's true for a lot of people, right? Like that whole, I know I want to be able to think about something else, but what should I be thinking about? How do I begin? How do I consider it? And I think sometimes people undervalue what their business is worth, or they undervalue what they've created too, which is, I also think, that little, kind of mind trash that sometimes gets in our way. So what do you see? So you've been doing this with contractors. What do you see as one of the biggest blind spots that you've identified that people have? And especially as what have you discovered about doing this work with contractors, and what have you discovered as some of their biggest blind spots about it?
The most interesting insight I've gotten from this is, with every contractor I've worked with, only one has wanted to leave. And so really the focus has really been reset, that they don't want to leave the business because these are, people having done this 25, 35, even 40 years. They're good at what they do. All right. They love the industry. They love the business. But what they would like to do is remove themselves from some of the day-to-day functions and activities. And to them, working 3 days a week, that's retirement. And it matches what I'm doing,
Yeah.
which is
and choices about what they do with their time, right?
yes, and creating that freedom to say, I can work less, but then how do I delegate effectively? Who do I delegate this to? And what is the plan to begin to identify those priorities, and how is that, handed off? And I guess the biggest, another big insight is, as I'm working with people, I'm saying, okay, we're going to look at a plan to assist you with beginning to transfer some of these day-to-day functions and activities. But let me ask another question, which is, if something happened to you or someone in your family and you couldn't come to work for 4 to 6 weeks, what plan do you have? And not one contractor I've talked with has had any kind of contingency plan. So part of this is not just planning for this next stage, but let's also plan for the unplanned. And let's begin to say, can we create some redundancy in your business model where there's a backup? And the military has done this so well.
Yeah. So speak to that a little bit, because I think that's like how? Give me an example.
And the redundancy I like to refer to is key people in the company. You as an owner, you may have some specific functions. Is there an office manager that can, number one, know account numbers, know, key people that they need to address if you weren't there, have passwords? Is there a production manager who you can begin to hand off specific, if needed, specific production activities? And just familiarize the people, because number one, if you can create that degree of understanding and comfort within the company, then you're really communicating to them, we are going to grow and we're going to continue. And even if something happened to me, then people in the company know that our job is solid. We continue. So it creates a sense of confidence, creates a sense of just assurance that they see an owner, good employees see an owner maintaining that company profitability and progress, because change happens. So to me, it not only protects the owner, but then creates a sense of confidence and assuredness within the employees themselves. Gosh, the owner's really thinking about this. I'm glad I work here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So, that's really the key to being able to get out of your business is that you can know that it can run without you, right? And that means that you right people on the bus in the right seats, that they're trained, that you have been able, what I find, and maybe you find this too, is that a lot of times smaller contractors, or even I'll say smaller contractors, I'll notice it's like so much of it is between their 2 ears about what they do. And it's hard to imagine, how do I replicate that through somebody else when I've learned it sort of like through the school of hard knocks, or like it took me years to get here. I've done succession work with lots of my clients over the years too. And that seems to be one of the big issues for people, right? Is how do I get this, 30, 40 years worth of experience, imbued into somebody else so that they can do it. And so that's a process, right? It takes some time to get it from what's between your 2 ears and to go through that process. But if we don't choose at some point, right, to start doing that, then it doesn't happen. So the more, even just thinking, and, whether somebody's listening to this and they're, in their 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, 70s, it's like there's a time to start to think about your ability to be able to get yourself free of the day-to-day operations of your business. Means you've been able to replicate what you do through someone else, which means you got to get it from between your 2 ears documented, right? So that's where you're talking about like having processes and training people, and that's really key, right?
And those processes, you're now building transferable value. And I'd mentioned to you in a past conversation that these are people who've been in business 25, 35, even 40 years, established relationships, trade contractors, suppliers, a good customer base, loyal employees. And the reality is there's legacy. And so can we monetize over time that legacy, because to the degree, and you just said it, that the company isn't dependent on one person, you begin approaching this transferable value. And traditionally, two good key employees. But it's interesting that probably half the owners I've worked with, probably more than half, are financially secure based on what they've done in their own business. But they're doing this because they want to take care of good employees. They want to reward good employees. They want to take care of good customers. So really, this whole legacy conversation and putting in place an ability to transfer the company and maintain the quality of the products and services.
Yeah. So maybe let's get into a little bit of the how does somebody begin, right, planning for how they're going to do that. And I heard you use the word legacy processes. I think it would be good for you to define that. Okay. What does that mean for you when you use that word? And maybe just give people like some ideas of where do they begin? What are some, like, what are, I don't know, maybe 3 or 5 things that are like the key, like, do this, like start working on this to start to begin this whole transition and ability to be able to have your business run without you and transition it to maybe the next generation, maybe employees, maybe your kids, right? Yeah.
So it's what I try to do is, imagining trying to do this, you're saying, God, where do I begin? You just said it. So what I like to do is sit with somebody and say, show me a current company organizational chart. And let's just look 6 months into the future. If you could delegate certain tasks, the ones you really don't like doing, and in every business, owners have taken things on out of necessity. So what are things that if you could let go just in the next 6 months, what would those be? And I've got a neat little report called the Owner Centricity Report. And people identify all the areas of the business they're currently involved. And then between that and the org chart, I'm just saying, let's just look 6 months. What are 2, 3, or 4 functions that you could delegate? And let's identify what those are. Now, if we can put those functions into writing, and it's just an exercise because they're already doing them, our key employee is doing them. Let's put it into writing. And now we're approaching a point where we can communicate expectations through, that understanding. And then I've got another little worksheet I use called the management succession worksheet. And again, it's just a future, which is people begin saying, here's what I'm doing now. Who could be my successor? And it's just a conversation, just like what we're having now. And like any building plan, guess what? It changes. All right. We start with a plan, but can we amend the plan? Of course we can. Mm-hmm. All right. Things happen. Things come up. There's a little detour. Let's take the little detour. But from each one of those detours, we learn more about our business.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I'm going to repeat back what I heard you say. I was you were talking. So like a few things that people can do to begin to start to consider, what can I get off of my plate to have somebody else do? How can I begin this process of having the business not be so completely dependent on me? And begin the process of looking at who could be stepping in next. So what I heard is create an organizational chart and identify in the next 6 months, what would you like to let go of, like 3 to 5 functions. Yeah. I love that. I think that's a really great visual way for people to be able to look at, all right, what are all the positions within my company? And what are the functions that I could let go of? And then put those functions, was the second thing you said, put those functions in writing, right? Yes. So start to codify in writing. How do you do that? Get what's between your 2 ears.
Yep.
To train people in it. And then the third thing I heard you say is identify who could possibly be that successor. Yes. And I love that, because even though, as you say, you might change your mind, but the thing is that asking that question early on is a way for you to start to develop that person. And no, they're not going to have your 30 or 40 years experience of school of hard knocks that taught you everything you know. But if you identify that person earlier, and I found that clients I've worked with who do that, it's really a good, successful strategy, because you start to bring them into conversations in a different way when you know that you've got somebody who has that interest that you're interested in. So that's great. That's awesome.
And my experience has also been good employees want responsibility. And so the degree that I can communicate, this is what I'm thinking, here's what I'd like to do with you, and then jointly, collaboratively creating that future.
Totally agree. Yep, totally agree. I always say that people, like as human beings, we fundamentally want to have a sense of contribution, belonging, and mattering. And for all of us, right? And so I completely agree with you. I love that. That's spot on. Well, David, before we wrap up, I know that you said that you had something that you were willing to share with people to help them sort of get take the next step in this for themselves. Can you just talk about that a bit?
Well, I've got just an exit assessment in people in 15 minutes. It's on my website, can take an exit assessment. It kicks out a report and it just highlights where are people on that path.
All right.
And it doesn't demand immediate activity, but it's a check-in.
Awesome.
And it really is, what are the areas that you can look at transferring, and some areas of urgency, so you can begin to prioritize. What are those things I really should be looking to do?
Great. Perfect. I think that's a great tool. I'm going to put the link here, but I'll also put it in the post so that people can get that.
Great.
And David, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience. And I hope that you all have gotten something. I'm sure you have gotten something from listening to this interview with David. And I encourage you to go check out the assessment, kind of a fun tool for any of us to really go look at and go, hey, where do I need to sort of shore up? Or what are some things I can think about that maybe I haven't thought about in terms of my next stage of life, succeeding our business, selling our business, whatever that might be for you. So thanks again.
Creating freedom. I mean, this is kind of, yes.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
So thank you for the invite. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you. We'll enjoy David's assessment, guys, and we'll see you next time on The Profit Builder. Thanks again for being here today.